Welcome to the Nightbird Radio Podcast. I'm Timothy Saylor, and I'm going to be your host this evening as we sound out the subconscious, navigate the nocturnal, and explore the farthest reaches of our experience. Coming at you from the back of an 86 Dodge Ram van on the rolling foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains, in the Great Forest, deep in the heart of the Kali Yuga. This is radio for the hauntological turn. And welcome back, Nightbirds. It's great to have you back, and it's great to be back. This week, I am so excited to be joined by Louis Galindo and Jack Grayle. Louis is a teacher, an actor, a poet, and a magical practitioner. He is also a life coach in training. Jack Grayle is an author, an actor, a magical practitioner, and a teacher of magic at Blackthorn School. How are you guys doing tonight?
Woohoo!
Doing great.
Full of energy after that intro, that's for sure. Oh my God, Tim, I love it.
I love doing it. I didn't used to do it live, and then I had this kind of thing. It's like, why am I not doing that live? It really puts us into the Nightbird space.
I love it. It's so unapologetic. It's brassy. I love it, man.
I'm glad you enjoy it. Well, yeah. So we had a conversation, kind of leading up to this conversation that we're about to have now, and I think it was on all of our hearts and minds to have a discussion about the intersection between magic and art. And so really excited to have that conversation now. Before we get into it, if you guys want to give just a brief intro for people who may not know you, who you are and where they can find you, what you offer. And I'll let you decide who goes first.
Jack.
Well, I've been named first. Well, I'm Jack Grayle. My biggest accomplishment is being a friend of Louis Galindo. But in my secondary ones, I'm a writer and a poet. I wrote a grimoire to Hecate called The Hecatian. And I have another book coming out called Sigrin and the Mist, which is a play script about a Valkyrie. And I teach classes at the Blackthorn School on ancient magic and the techniques of ancient Egyptian and Greek magic. And I also have classes available on the esoteric aspects of Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. And I have a background acting, and I direct to theatrical stuff. And I love performance art, and I love magic, and I love poetry, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Great to have you here, Jack.
Thank you.
Luis Galindo, actor, poet. I'm an English teacher. I'm the head of the English department at my school. I teach children with learning disabilities. I've written 2 volumes of poetry and a play. I do a lot of theater work, film and TV, and quite a bit of anime, as it would turn out. And I'm training to become a life coach. So I will have a website up eventually, but for now you can find me on social media.
Awesome. Also great to have you here, Louis.
Likewise. Great to be here, man.
Yeah, so this is such a rich topic, because I think that we're always practicing magic, and I think that we're always making art. Like, I think that that the way we live can be that, and that the way I move in the world can be that. What do you guys think about that idea? There is no separation there. That's kind of it's almost like an illusory wall that stands between these things, right?
Yeah, 100%. And you're totally right. The housewife that makes a lunch for her kid is showing creativity and artistry in what she does. The guy at work who's trying to look prepared and competent when he feels anything but is putting on a performance. We act all day long. We compel spiritually all day long. We become and unbecome all day long. We use our creativity, our inspiration all day long, and yet so few of us identify as artists because we're either not paid for it or because it's been drummed out of us at an early age that that's for someone else, that's for celebrities. You ask a class full of third graders who can draw, who can sing, who can dance, every hand goes up in the class. By the time you get to sixth, seventh grade, you know this, Louise, you say, who here can dance? One or two hands. You
Yeah.
know, by the time we get to high school, who here can draw? Who here can write a poem? No hands go up. It's drummed out of us that unless you're the best and recognized at the best of everything, you're nothing. It's not for you. It's for a handful of content creators that everyone recognizes. And that is a terrible tragedy because every human is creative and has artistic impulses. And part of being human is creating art, whether it's art through your life or art through your dance or art through your modeling or your art through your artistic creations, whatever they may be. All life can be lived with artistry, and magic is the same. Magic, if we're compelling change through the agency of unseen powers, we do that all day long, calling upon our ancestors, calling upon our subconscious, calling upon our energies, calling upon those things that made us who we are to get us through the challenges of today. And we never once think of it as magic. And all these people, if they come to it, often they come to magic through sort of a political thing, well, I want to express my I don't agree with the overarching patriarchal corporate culture, therefore I'm going to identify as a witch, or it's an aspect of feminism, or it's an aspect of my culture. I'm Greek, so I associate with the Hellenic vibe. And it often comes through identity stuff that they're introduced to it. But when you refer to people as an artist and that they're doing art, that magic is an art form, there's a sort of shock, and they don't recognize it as such. But all three are combined inextricably, I find, like the braided cords of a rope. And the more you recognize that, the more it frees you to find the art in your magic and to find the magic in your art. If you know what I mean, Louis,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I think I see this with kids a lot. They feel like they don't even have permission to do it.
Right.
That they're not allowed to express themselves creatively. The most creative they get nowadays, and I'm not belittling them or I'm not being reductive when I say that literally some of these kids' only creative outlet is playing video games. Some of them are creating content on social media, which I think is could be a form of creativity, absolutely, and especially if you're dancing or showing off your theater skills. A lot of theater kids do reels on Instagram or whatever, and for them to know that they have permission, and it doesn't change there. I mean, you carry that into adulthood, through adolescence into adulthood, when you're thrown into the thresher of late capitalism and trying to survive. You think you don't have time for creativity. I'll tell you, man, I've been hungry on the streets of New York and Los Angeles, like literally no food, and those were some of my most creative times. Like, how am I going to get out of this?
Some of my best magic too.
Unfortunately, those situations happened to me before I was consciously doing magic. So I'm sure I did magic because things would happen when I had sheer will behind me going, I got it. I need $400. How am I going to get it?
Yeah.
You make it happen,
No.
So, I think
too, Louis, talking about kids and stuff, like our culture nowadays, there's such pressure to be a passive consumer of other people's content. And very soon, most of that content won't even be created by humans. But there's enormous pressure. Just watch, just scroll, just feed into what your feed, just eat what you're given. You know what I'm saying? Spend money, observe, give clicks, give likes, give whatever. There's enormous pressure on that. And it's added to the fact that a lot of the music we listen to, it's hard to recreate on your own unless you have a lot of equipment or things like that. You know, a lot of the things we see that we like, you know, kids love movies, kids love this and that. But yeah, the phone is useful, but it's not as easy to create in some ways just because of the cultural pressure to consume. And we become, and I've said this repeatedly, we're becoming like ghosts in our own lives where
Yeah.
you're encouraged to watch other people cook instead of cooking. You're encouraged to watch people, buying and flipping houses instead of doing it. You're encouraged to watch people make other money, go on vacation, go on exotic trips instead of doing it yourself. Watch them do all the things that are normal and human to want. And then all of a sudden, people wonder why they're depressed or why they feel disempowered.
Mhm.
And it's like, well, all you do all day long is watch other people that have more than you get more than you. Like, who wouldn't feel diminished
Yeah.
after that? And magic and art are two ways to reclaim that lost territory, right? And regain ground to say, I have power, I have potential, I have reach, I have scope, I have authority, I have sovereignty, and to find that flame within, that you can blow on and make flare into power.
That's
That's
so good. It's so good. Yeah.
beautifully put.
I was given an assignment at school to read this book, and it's called The Anxious Generation.
Mm.
And there's a correlation between smartphones and social media and the the mental health of the youth of this country, not just the youth, mostly in the West.
Mm-hmm.
And the correlation is that the more time kids have spent on social media, completely forgetting about outside play time, where they're developing social how to read social cues. These things that kids do, play games, dangerous games, even risky behavior, risky play is good for them, and it's ritualized. And this is vital. We've been doing it as a species for hundreds of thousands of years, and we stopped around 2010.
Yeah.
When everybody got cell phones, when little kids got cell phones, smartphones, and they're left unattended in the wilds of the online wilderness, they've stifled their own development as human beings because they don't get to be creative on the playground. They don't get to be creative in groups the way we've done since mankind crawled out of the ooze. So it's fascinating that that's happening now, and we can change it, but it's going to take a lot of work.
Well, look at it this way. I know this will resonate with you, Louis, because we're the same age. Just in my backyard, in the area I live in, I'm lucky enough to live in an area. There's bike paths leading to a creek, and there's a little wetland near it, and there's some old graves in a patch of land right next to that, and there's a lake on the other side of it, and there's some little patch of woods near the houses, and there's a trail that runs through them all. I've been here in a year and a half. I've never seen a young person in any of it.
That
And
breaks
here
my
it is,
heart.
the height of summer. The height of summer. The nights doesn't get dark, dusk doesn't come till 9:45 where I'm at. Never see a child in the woods, in the ravine, at the graveyard, at the you see them occasionally fishing. But I would have been, my parents would have kicked me out. I would have been living there,
Absolutely.
as a kid, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Well, I think that's one of the great things about, and I think that magic is probably making such a great return, at least to the conscious, not that it necessarily went anywhere, but it is definitely bubbling up to the conscious, kind of from, being occulted. It's not occulted anymore. It's out in the open, right? And I think one of the great things about that is that it gives people the opportunity to have those experiences that you're talking about, going into the woods, going to a graveyard, seeing the reflection, or seeing the shadows move and being kind of scared and scaring yourself and scaring your friends.
Yeah.
And so the hope that I have is that with magic does come the art as well, and Jack, you use the word power, which I'm I'm very I'm very glad you did, because that, I think, is what both the artist and the magician seek,
Yeah.
is that power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is a power that does stand in opposition to whatever whatever the whatever it is that wants to strap a feed bag on me and just have me scroll all day. I cannot say what that is. I get tempted to have a lot of ideas about that. You know what I mean? Is it capitalism? Is it lizard people? I don't know, but it's certainly something happening. But that power that you describe, it stands in opposition to these forces, and it wants to breathe inspiration into our lives, and it wants us to live a life of inspiration. I think one of the coolest things that I've gotten to experience has been taking your PGM course, Jack, this year.
Mhm.
And one thing that I've really noticed about it that I love so much about this PGM magic, and I always was exposed to it before, but I never quite got it. It didn't quite click for me. It was just like, okay, that's something that it's all based on, but it's over here, and I'm doing this, even though I didn't know I was doing a bunch of PGM stuff and didn't even know it. Um, but is this idea that in these spells, in these rituals, I am stepping into the myth, and I am deliberately placing
Mhm.
myself in the myth, in the center of that stream. And I think as artists, we do that too. The
Yeah.
same thing.
Yeah. 100%. And for anyone who doesn't know, the PGM is just it's a way of referring to some ancient Egyptian scrolls of magic, which contain detailed descriptions of how people did magic, 2000 years ago. And you're 100% right. One of the first shocks people get when they encounter it is the God face technique, what academics would call theosis, where the magician, the sorcerer, the priest, takes on the role of a god or a figure that's god adjacent. Everyone thinks of magic as being like, I, Jack, am going to perform magic. But in ancient times, a priest would put aside their own identity and they would say, I, Anubis, call upon Osiris. I am the black sun of the horizon. I am the one who call upon my father, the great drowned one of drowned ones, and I call upon him and the love he bears me to give me such and such and empower me. He's playing a role. He's putting on a mask. He's putting on a costume. There's a ritual aspect to it. It's a performance. It's being watched both by the other priests, probably some of the public, and certainly by the god who would have inhabited a statue. He's performing a ritual text in ritual surroundings with ritual actions and ritual words. And that's his way of claiming power, of literally stepping into the shoes of a deity, right? And when we do the headless rite and we start out by saying, I am Moses, you're stepping into the role of Moses. And then you say, I am the angel of the Pharaoh Osoronophis. You're stepping into the feet of the messenger of this great god that's, adjacent to Osiris. And then you step into the shoes, the feet, identify at the end as this headless diamond, this great god of phonic, god of power, and underworldly might. It's performative. And some people balk when they see it. They're like, well, this says I am Isis. I can't say that because I'm not Isis. It's like you're missing the point. You're missing the point. It's like an actor saying, well, I can't play Macbeth. I never stabbed a king. It's like,
Yeah.
well, bro, you're missing the point. This is a great opportunity for you. What a shame if we could only play what we are. My friend teaches kids, Louis, in a theater class at a small college, and he's having a hell of a time because the kids they're getting, they don't want to play anything but they are.
Yeah.
He gave them a scene from Brighton Beach to work on, and they said, "We can't do this. We're not Jewish. We can't do that."
Right.
He gave him another scene to work on, and one kid said, "I can't play this character. I'm gay. This character is not gay." He
Yeah.
gave him another scene. A person says, "Well, this person," he says, his dad was Hispanic. My dad wasn't. All of a sudden, you're like, "Oh my God, wait! So you only going to play people your age, your race, your gender, like no one writes plays for you. Like, why are you here?"
Right.
It blows my mind, man.
Yeah. I have a friend who just completed her MFA at a big school here in Texas
Mm-hmm.
and UT in Austin.
Mm-hmm.
Some of her acting students would not talk about having sexual attraction for someone because it made them feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And like she couldn't use the word sexual attract the phrase sexual attraction. She could barely get away with the phrase you're flirting with one another.
Oh,
Uh, and this is directly related to that thing I was talking about earlier, how not developing those skills of play and ritual in the outdoors creates this legion of kids and adolescents that are terrified of everything because they never learned how to become a person because they've been living online. Now, that again, this is the thesis of that one book, right? But you see it everywhere, and if you're choosing to go into a profession where you plumb the depths of what it is to be a human being and have freedom and play, maybe you should rethink what that is, right?
here's the thing I want to throw out there. And you think, Louis, think about how much of growing up is learning to communicate with the opposite sex,
Sure.
learning to communicate with people older than you, learning to
Right.
communicate with people different cultural background,
Yeah.
learning to communicate with people just not like you, man. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And now, when there's such pressure to protect people from anyone that's not like them or to wall them off for anyone with different opinions, different sites, now when it's going to be easier than ever to get an AI girlfriend or AI boyfriend who just
Right.
parrots back at you, available 24/7 and compliments you and parrots back at you whatever you want to hear about yourself, how in the world are people going to be able to navigate that difficult territory of dealing with an other, someone that has agency, is different needs, different protocols, different history, different desires, their own, and try to find a middle ground, that difficult compromise between what you want and what I want could become, there's some intersection of that Venn diagram, which is what we want, and to try to identify that and how hard it can be sometimes, and the idea that people are being protected from that process
Yeah.
with all this focus on what are you, what are you, what are you. But as any actor knows, you take away mask after mask after mask, I believe there's nothing there.
Yeah.
We are a series of masks that we take on to deal with the challenges of life from an early age. At early age, you can be one person around your alcoholic dad and another one around your grandmother who's sweet to you, another one around your teachers, another around the friends that speak your language, another one around the friends who don't, another one around the cop. Kids have a dozen masks, 2 dozen, 3 dozen, but
Yeah.
we never admit these personas, all this focus about the real you, your identity. Guess what?
Yeah.
It's all chosen. You choose it. You put it on. And that's the way it should be,
Yeah.
For that reason, it's important for people to realize there's so many selves they don't access. There's selves of power and selves of danger and selves of attractiveness and selves of fascination and
Yeah.
selves of discovery and selves of transcendent beauty and selves of sketchiness and selves of, esoteric wonder and artistry. And yet it just comes down to, well, I can't draw, well, I'm shy. Well,
Yeah.
I'm not built like those people on TV or, the thing. And you give power and you lose the chance to become and unbecome and become and unbecome, which is one of the great pleasures of being human.
Yeah. That's so well put. I I I think I heard Marlon Brando talking. It was on the uh, um, Dick Cavett show.
Yeah.
Tons of videos of him on YouTube, and someone I respect tremendously
Yeah. Yeah.
is Brando, and he talks like he said that, right? We're all acting. You're all playing a role. Everyone's playing a role
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
Everyone, and he could, but he had that laser sharp eye that could see bullshit a mile away. Uh, but I think that getting the kids back, these younger generations, or anyone, it doesn't have to be just the kids. I don't want to make it just about them. It's grown-ups. I didn't come into
Yeah.
my occult practice until I was in my late 40s.
Yeah.
And so it's never too late
Yeah.
to get back to that. I wanted to get back to and that feeling I had when I was a kid, when I saw the first Star Wars and I came home, I, with 100% of my being, believed that I was a Jedi.
Yeah.
I knew it, right? And therefore I was, because I behaved like one.
Yeah.
And I got in trouble at school for signing my all my assignments were signed Zorro Skywalker.
That's dope. That's a good name.
So I believed that shit, man, and I thought I had the Force and could wield it like a weapon.
The,
So
oh,
that's what we want to get back to.
the greatest gift magic gives is permission. It gives you permission to open doors of wonder and
Yeah,
rediscover the sacred and become more than you thought you were. And
absolutely.
there's no wonder, I think, that so many people, young and older, are attracted to iconography of witches and things like that, transgressive. I think it's mostly linked to the look and but there's a hunger there to be transgressive. There's a hunger to be adversarial. There's a need to be independent. There's a sense that there's fingers closing around your throat. And those fingers closing around your throat, cutting off your breath, cutting off your choices,
Yeah,
determining who you are. And who you are is basically an animal to be milked. And there's a sense of wanting to push back.
yeah.
And so anyone who's attracted to Dua Lipa singing a witch song or buying a black hat or identifying as a sorcerer from Harry Potter or Gandalf or whatever, all this stuff, it's easy to make fun of, but it's people reaching out for what you just described when you
Yeah.
saw that Jedi paradigm. You sensed what's cool is you didn't just think, what a cool movie, I wish I was in it. You thought immediately, that's real. And I have that in me. And I can do things like that. That power, that unseen power to affect reality, to become something noble and great and whatever, that knowledge was like instantaneous, it sounded like. And it changed the way you acted, and your sense of yourself.
I think
Totally.
it's a remembering too. Like there's an aspect of anamnesis to this where like the myth, whether it be Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, or a Greek myth or a Norse myth, whatever it is, when it touches my core like that, like you had that experience, it's so easy for as a kid to say, I am in it, because I think it's easier for me to remember, like as a kid, to remember that that's true. Like I'm
Yeah.
remembering a truth about myself that's been obscured by
Yes.
this curtain.
Yes, yes. It's like what they say about the Constitution, that it doesn't grant rights, it recognizes them.
Yes,
And
yes.
magic is the same way. Magic rituals do not give power, they release power.
Mm.
And it's as if the mundaneness all day long is like layer after layer of ice or something like that, these coatings that build up slowly, obscuring what's within. But when you
Yeah.
do magic, but when you create art, or when you have some experience that's transcendently powerful, it's like hitting that ice with a hammer. At first, there's a crack, and then there's a bigger crack, and then there's a gap, and then it shatters. And so these techniques of magic, like a lot of techniques of art and theater, as you know, Louis, if people watch an actor warming up or doing exercises, if they're not an actor, they'll laugh. They're like, why is he doing those noises? Why is he bending backwards? Why is he running around a circle? Why is he reciting his lines, in a funny way? Why is he
Yeah.
speaking with an accent? Why is he doing this? But there's a reason. You're trying to shake off this mundaneness and wake up that flame within that's volatile and multivalent. And the magic too, repeating nonsense words and identifying as something you're clearly not, and intoning vowels and stamping the floor and clapping your hands and and whooshing out your breath, barking, howling, hissing, calling upon powers that no one's mentioned for 2 millennia. All of it is meant to shatter this stasis that encompasses us, that's self-imposed and imposed from without by those, including ourselves, who have a vested interest in us being docile.
Yeah. Yeah, man, I totally get that. I've always thought that, theater should still have some ritual to it. I mean, it
Mhm.
is, technically it is, but if you're going to see Little Abner, or whether it's, a play like Little Abner or Macbeth, something
Mhm.
utterly magical, right? And something that's seemingly mundane, Barefoot in the Park, that doesn't seem too magical, right? So any one of those things, you hear artists say, "Oh, we need to bring the ritual back, we need the magic back," but I find that in the theater, there's not a lot of that going on. So I took it upon myself to do that,
Oh,
right? To really make a statement that when I get to the theater, the ritual has begun. These are the steps I take when the lights come up and the stage manager says, actors go.
mhm.
The ritual is in full swing because now there's an audience participating. And even when I decided to start doing that, I felt like, is this okay? Is this all right to do it? And
Yeah.
that grew and grew up to the point where now it's like, fucking am, dude. This is the only way to do it. I have to do it like this,
What,
right?
what kind
So,
of stuff do you do? Do you mind sharing with us just like some of the
sure.
stuff that you how you've ritualized your work?
Yeah, I will. I will mix things up, right? So I will perform a the Orphic hymn to Dionysus.
Mm,
I will take a libation to the theater and pour it out in an offering to Dionysus.
nice.
I will offer, I do it at rehearsal too. I will offer the entire rehearsal process as an offering to Dionysus. And on specific nights, I will ask Dionysus and his leopard to join me on the stage.
Oh, I love it.
And
Nice.
then when we open the play, same thing. I will dedicate opening night and closing night to Dionysus and ask him to join me on stage, and then maybe one or two in the middle of the run.
Oh,
That's a cool idea of first fruits too. I like what you did.
oh, I
Yeah,
love it. I love it. And in case anyone here doesn't know, theater in the West started through it was meant to be an offering to the god Dionysus. And Athens, right at the foot of the Parthenon, is the original theater to Dionysus, which is a small stone theater, semicircle, outdoors. It's got a magnificent stone throne right front and center, so the main priest of Dionysus, and it's got a circular stage, and it's where for the first time they enacted these rites, part of which would have been the slaughter of a goat at the beginning as an offering. And it's interesting because scholars say initially it was an offering to Dionysus because goats ate grape leaves, and his epiphany, was wine and the drinking of wine and the ecstasy that comes of that. So offering a goat was originally, they say, like here's an offering, like we'll kill the creature that's been, eating the vine leaves. But gradually, of course, the creature sacrifice became associated with the god he was sacrificed to. And so the goat became a symbol of Dionysus and that goat energy, that raucous, lusty, you
yeah,
know, hungry power that's, intractable. And this idea of bringing that back, of
mhm,
honoring that god of androgyny and ecstasy and wildness. And he was a dangerous god, Louis. His nicknames were like Eater of Flesh and Bromios, the Roarer, and the Wild One. And his cult, if you read scripts, like Baki,
yeah,
he's known to if you worshipped him, you were down, but it was going to be a wild ride. And if you insulted or ignored or diminished him, you could find your head, on a branch. Like
sure.
he's a wild god. You never quite know what to expect, in literature and myth when you encounter Dionysus. And I love the idea of you inviting that spirit of wildness and ecstasy and performative power into your shows.
Every time I do it, something jumps off, something wild happens. I'm telling you, I've spilled entire like drinks all over the stage. Lights have gone out.
That's fantastic.
People will get up and leave. Sometimes people get a little too drunk at the theater.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I can see
Kinds
it.
of weird shit happens.
I
So
bet.
I started to be a little more judicious about
You know what, though? I love the idea of theater as a place where you never quite know what's going to happen. You can
Yeah,
rehearse
sure.
all you want, you can prep whatever, but you walk on that stage knowing we're well prepared, the script
Yeah.
is set, we rehearsed, but no one really knows what's about to happen.
Yeah. And I think he shows up from time to time
Yeah.
in people,
Mm.
I think John Belushi
Oh,
had
yeah.
definitely had some Dionysus in him. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, of course, of course.
Something wild, something feral.
Think of Robin Williams with his
Absolutely.
uncontrollable energy
Jim
and the
Morrison.
yeah, absolutely. This strange god of, of beauty and ecstasy, dangerous, and and also to a degree self-destructive. In many of the myths, he keeps dying in his myths. He's always been killed or dying or people killing him, and he comes back. He resurrects and he comes back. It's like the grapes. You crush them, you make the juice, and then the vines grow again in the spring. And I think of that as great artists, musicians, and actors who we lose. You
Yeah.
know, they grew strong. They fed us with the fruit of their artistry, and then they'll live again as they inspire a new generation of comics and performers
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
dancers and actors. It's a cycle. But how noble to be part of that, how great to be
Well,
part of that tradition.
yeah, man. And I think, it was part of the evolution of my journey as a magician. Like, are you going to talk the talk, or are you going to walk the walk,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
see what happens.
It's
Right?
I love it. It's an experiment. The way you describe it, it's like an experiment, right?
Right. And then so the last play I did was literally called It Is Magic. And it's by a playwright that lives in Chicago, a guy named Mickle Mayer.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and he writes some pretty out there stuff. And so this was a mashup of the Three Little Pigs and Macbeth.
Oh,
Nice.
So yeah, the
That's
play
cool.
takes place in a community theater, and there's a woman who works at the theater has written a script for an adult adaptation of the Three Little Pigs, and upstairs in the main theater is opening night of Macbeth, and I played the artistic director and the director of the Scottish play, and I terrorize these sisters that are trying to produce this play on the Three Little Pigs, and then a mysterious third woman shows up and reminds the other two that they met upon the heath in
oh,
Scotland many, 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 many years ago, and then they wake up and realize that they are the three sisters from Macbeth,
oh,
and they laugh and ridicule the paltriness of the production upstairs until they infuse it with magic. They create a magic spell on the stage, and they write sigils and create them and draw them on the stage during the performance. And then something terrible and wonderful happens upstairs, is that the big bad wolf shows up.
oh my God, that's
And,
fantastic.
and the spirit of the Scottish play takes over, and the entire theater burns to the ground.
Oh,
And there's a blood orgy on the stage and in the audience.
Hell yeah.
And witches are like, yeah, so when shall we three meet again? Let's do it again sometime. Yeah, it's very powerful. So during the production, and my wife is in that production.
oh,
My wife is a shamanic healer practitioner.
oh, wow.
So she was down with my idea, which was to teach the cast how to create sigils and launch them. So we did. And we spent some time doing sigil work and creating statements. And then every night they would do this ritual in which the sigils are activated with the live audience, unbeknownst to the audience. I was like, when I was talking my castmates into doing this, I was like, are they going to think I'm completely fucking insane? And a lot of them were totally like, no, this is cool. Wow, I've never.
Good. I wondered.
They're like,
Yeah, that's awesome.
how do you know about this? I'll tell you later. I never did. So
Just keep that mystery going, you know?
yeah.
Absolutely.
So this was the first time I actually invited other people willingly into my ritual theater practice, on purpose. And I kind of stepped out of the broom closet a little bit on this last production because I've had to keep my occult identity hidden, keep it occult because, I'm a teacher and
Yeah.
and probably some people wouldn't look too kindly on that. So, which makes it even more rebellious, feel more rebellious and more, recalcitrant. Like feels a little
Good.
more rock and roll,
Absolutely. And good
Yeah.
for you. What a great way to introduce them to an empowering way to expand their sense of the possible and
Yeah.
touch unseen currents of power by creating something intuitive and creative that's not explicit and linear and, rational, but contains power. What a fantastic thing to share. Good for you.
I can't imagine what that energy must have been like because it's like you were like in like 3 levels of abstraction at that point, right? And you've got the sigils going, then you've got the audience energy. Like, what was that like?
Well, so this particular play, I decided to mix things up. I asked permission from Dionysus to allow me to offer the entire rehearsal and run of the play to Hecate instead.
Nice. Awesome.
So, 6 nights of performances, opening, closing, and a few in between, I performed a rite backstage before opening. I would get there early or whatever and do my rite to Hecate while I could hear the people coming in, while there's mist and fog and music. And
Oh,
sitting
that's
in the
so
back.
great, man. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
So it wasn't as rowdy as had Dionysus been around, but there was definitely this current of power, which this word has come up a few times, right? We are using the word power to describe these things, and I'm all for it. I love this word, but I heard this definition in graduate school that stuck with me, and it's useful to me as a magical practitioner. It is because it's adjacent to a lot of occult philosophy, and it is the power can be defined as the velocity with which our thoughts and desires become reality.
Yeah,
wow.
that's good.
This is something I learned from Landmark Forum, Landmark Education, which informed a lot of the work I did in grad school. So I've stuck with that definition. I mean, is that far from what you guys mean when you say power?
I'm just still trying to get what a beautiful definition. It
Yeah,
reminds me of that concept that matter is just light slowed down, and that if matter could go fast enough, it becomes light. Because
yeah,
for many of us, our desires and the reality remain miles apart. But the word velocity implies that if we could move fast enough, if we could get enough momentum, if we could break the stasis, if we could actually push through the inertia and build and build and build our trajectory and our velocity, we could begin to get the things we want by achieving this sort of critical mass. It's a very active paradigm.
yeah. It's from I think Werner Erhard's responsible for that definition.
No kidding. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
So,
Yeah.
well, like if you pray for this thing you desire and want, and that's going to get you, and it'll work, right? Maybe. But if you pray and do sigils, it'll work. Your power increases. If you pray and sigil and create and petition a god or goddess for help, and then your ancestors, and you do it on a specific night during a specific hour, your power probably increases.
Yeah, you got
Right?
more juice.
You nailed it. You nailed it. And so much what is often for people that don't know a lot about, occultic or this type of ancient magic, so much of our paradigm for spirituality is just begging. Please give me this. I'm so sorry that I am who I am. Please give me this. It could not be more disempowering. It's saying, I will never be enough. So you please bridge the gap and give me the thing that I can't get for myself.
Right.
That, is a very traditional Western, Christian paradigm for prayer.
Yep.
Ancient magic, as you know, it may have prayers in it praising a god. It may have prayers celebrating their myth or naming their associations or their mythopoetic, reality. But then magic goes a step further and says, I call upon these powers that are adjacent to me and available to me. And now I am going to trigger the getting of the things I need. And I am going to step into the shoes of the power that I've called forth. And ultimately, I am going to give me the thing I want, because it won't be me giving it anymore. It'll be me Anubis or me Hecate or me Dionysus. I'm a participant. There's, so much of mainstream religion creates sort of a firewall between the participant and the power. And a lot of, especially if you go up like Catholic, where, as I did, where you're not supposed to have direct experience of the power. There's people to do that for you. There's a priestly class. You can go to them if you have an issue. They'll deal with the power. But magic is a way of stepping into that ring of fire, of saying, I want to encounter this deity, dangerous as they may be, shapeless, amorphous, androgynous, ambiguous as they may be. I want to breathe that flame. I want to be adjacent to this entity. I want that entity to inhabit me. I want to exercise that power. And there's a million ways to do it, but you step into the ring and then you become capable of giving yourself what you need, because you're more than yourself. You're not just Jack, you're Jack plus. You're Jack plus Anubis, Jack plus Moses, Jack plus John D, Jack plus Osiris. You merge, and to merge, you have to call it forth. But then you step into that form that you've called forth, and now you're part of it. You're part of its story, And I love that, because you become, if you like me, you grew up loving certain stories and myths, whether it was Narnia, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, but there's this hunger as a child to be part of them. It's not enough just to read it. If you fall in love with the story, you want to inhabit the story. And you might even dream that those characters are your friends, or that you meet, and you really want that experience. You might play them in your waking life and try to dream about them in your dream life. The wonderful thing about magic is it allows you to enter the story, and it allows you to continue the myth and become the next epiphany of the god in his time. Because these gods weren't static. They changed over times, and their myths accrued different legends and stories and aspects and flavors as the years went on. And we call them forth and we inhabit their world. We continue it. They live again through us and us through them. And the myth, the adventure continues, but we're part of the story now.
Yeah. Wow. Damn.
Yeah, I love that.
And it's sort of stacked up because you're stepping out of your everyday life where you practice magic into a agreed consensus reality that this is a play.
Yes.
And then on top of that, you're stepping into a current that is as old as history, which is theater, right? So it seems to allow for that kind of energy and power to come through. It's what it's built on. That's what its purpose was from the beginning, right?
Mm-hmm.
From the dithyramb to whatever's happening, at the theater, down the street right now. It's it's the same power.
And I think that there's also, like, for me at least, in my experience, when I see it working, I can see it working a couple ways in my life. Not only does calling in the spirit bring power in the sense that the spirit can do things that I can't necessarily do, or I'm not able to affect in the way that they might be able to affect, but I also find that the more I grow in relation to a spirit, the more I begin to take on their good attributes, um, and am able to integrate those into my life. And that's power as well, right? Because that's where the personal power comes in, where it's like, okay, I just started doing magic to like get some stuff that I wanted, but now I'm finding myself in this dynamic dance with the spirit where like I'm changing and are they changing too in relation to me? Like, um, like I've said this before, but I think that the reason that Odin has so many names is because there are as many Odins as there are people who relate to Odin.
Mm.
And, and yeah, so like that level of power too, where it's like the power of this transformation where I know for a fact I wouldn't be the person that I am if I didn't work with these spirits who, as we draw close together, you talk about that Venn diagram, like I start to inhabit the middle part where I'm like,
Mhm.
the lines are blurred between me and the spirit. Like like I'm having conversations with them, talk about sounding crazy.
No, no, that's
I
it.
love
And
it though.
any performer knows that. It's as you know, Louis, too. How many times have you seen an actor, you see this incredible performance, like, oh my God, that guy tore up the stage. What a powerhouse. And
Mm.
afterwards, you're excited to meet him and you go in the dressing room and you look around, you're like, where is he? And they're like, he's right here. And you look at him and you're like, that's him? And he
Yeah,
stands up and he's like, hi, and he doesn't meet your eye and he shakes your hand. You're like, dude, you were fantastic. He's like, thank you, thank you. You're like, there's no way this guy in front of me was the just playing, Claudius on stage, was just playing Prosper. There's no way this guy in front of me was him. But they became, you know what I mean? Something inhabited them. They transformed. Or when you see a ballerina on stage, who's just, playing the Firebird or playing the Black Swan, and she's so imperious and arrogant. And then you meet her backstage and she's socially awkward, or she's, self-effacing. And you think, oh my God, like it's like there was a whole different being on stage. And if you're lucky as a performer, you feel those moments too, when all of a sudden you're playing a character and you take a breath, and all of a sudden the feeling inhabits you of
yeah,
whatever that character is meant to feel, that wrath or that love or that ecstasy, and time stops. And then, 5 minutes later, the scene ends, and people are like, oh my God, that was the best it's ever gone. And you're like, did it?
yeah.
I can't even remember. Was it
Oh yeah.
okay? They're like, okay, dude, it was the best, and yet in the moment something happened and you lived the role. It wasn't just pretending to be something you're not.
That's right. Do you
This
transcend?
happens. Go ahead, sorry.
I was just agreeing. Yeah,
This happens in writing too, don't you think? Like, when you're writing and you really get in the zone
Yeah.
and it's like, dude, I'm not even coming up with this. I am plucking this out of the air. It's just like in the stream above my head, and I'm like lucky enough to be here, to be tapping into it. And then I'm like, did I write that? Or did the muse do that? Like, really, it feels like that sometimes, right?
yeah. I mean, everybody I respect, all my favorite songwriters and writers talk about that. Um, Bob Dylan said it about his process. You're like, I don't know how I didn't write that. No way I
Yeah.
wrote those lyrics to Desolation Row. I don't know where that came from. Tom Waits talks about the same things. Like you gotta pluck them out of the air when they come tap you on the shoulder. If you don't, they're gone forever.
Someone
They're
else
like,
gets them.
yeah, they're spirits or something. Uh, and I think that's probably true.
And everyone knows that feeling where you're ready to write, you got the time, you sit down, the laptop's there, you wait, blank sheet, type a sentence, delete it, type a sentence, delete it, type a sentence, delete it. Then all of a sudden the pump starts to prime, and one good phrase leads to another, and you sense one idea just out of reach, and it comes within reach. You sense them like planes coming into O'Hare, good
Yeah,
idea after good idea. And then someone knocks on the door and someone says, "Do you want to eat some lunch?" You're like, "No, no, I don't want to eat some lunch." I'm like, "Well, this is the only chance we're going to have to eat lunch." And you're like, "I'll eat lunch in a minute." Like, "Well, what does a minute mean? 15 minutes or 20 minutes?" You're like, "Give me half an hour." Like, "I won't be in half an hour." It's like, "All right, give me 15 minutes." They leave and you turn back to the laptop and like, "Oh no." It's
Yeah,
just,
too long.
it's just gone. It's like, who was that? Was that it was Coleridge who was writing Xanadu, right? And
Oh, I love
he
him.
got like 50 great lines, and then someone came and knocked on the door, and we'll never know that what the second half of the poem was because
Yeah.
it floated away, right?
Yeah.
That's
Damn.
but God, what a great feeling that even people who are totally atheistic know when that, if they're artists, if they're writers, when that vein gets tapped, when the words seem effortless, when it flows on the page,
Yeah.
there's something happening there that feels supra normal to be, like something beyond just someone coming up with something. It seems like there's a person whispering in your ear what to go next. It's a haunting experience. It can even be a little scary sometimes, like where's this
Hmm.
coming from? But there's no greater thrill, I think, for a writer to be in that vein and have it coming out because you feel like you're collaborating with something that you can't see.
Yeah.
And I
Uh-huh.
think that's what power feels like to me. It's collaborating with something I can't see. It's like when I'm living my life with power, I feel like I'm not doing it alone. Like as the
Mm.
best way I can describe it, right? Like I it is a collaboration. That is a perfect word, I think.
That Gordon White's definition of magic is the felt sense that the cosmos is co-creative, right?
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, I love
Laser
that too.
cosmos is co-creative. I'm paraphrasing it. It's not directly it, but
Okay, that
that's feels like it.
that brings me to something I wanted to ask about too, in terms of theater, especially, but I think it goes with all art as well. Like, so we all have had the experience. I'm assuming that when you're doing a ritual that lasts, especially like a ritual that like takes a long time to set up, takes
Mhm.
multiple days. I'm in the headspace of this ritual, possibly for like months sometimes, right? That what will happen is that the events in my life will start to like I'll start to get synchronicities
Mhm.
that speak to the ritual. Like I'm in that ritual space and it's like I can see the world dancing with me. Some like you said, sometimes it can get scary. Is that like do you feel that that's kind of like the same as when you're putting on a play that you've poured all this time into, you're all doing it together, you all know the lines together, and you're all doing it night after night? It's kind of like being in a ritual space for that extended period of time, right?
Oh yeah,
Oh yeah.
totally.
Oh
It's
yeah.
it can be scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There can be a strange too. I don't know if you feel this, Luis, but there's a lot of talk, which is in ancient magic and ancient, Orphic hymns and stuff about necessity, which is, it's fate, it's destiny, it's locked you in a path. You're going to be born, live, die. You are going to, it's kind of, their attitude was a lot of this is laid out for you. And if you're going to deviate from it, it takes a huge effort, a huge intention of will, and probably some magic too, if you're going to deviate from what was laid out for you. And the word they used it, was ananke, necessity. And it wasn't necessarily a great thing because most people had lives that were very anxious and stressful, back then. But as an actor, you get sort of a sense of that because when you step on stage, if you're playing a major role, soon as you step, that curtain comes up, you step on stage, the lights are on, you're locked into a pattern.
Yeah.
And unless you go totally rogue, you are going to be saying the words set down for you. You're going to move about where they told you to move. You're going to meet the witches, kill the king, order so and so to be killed, be cornered in your own castle, fight this person, win, fight that person, lose. Like your fate is set as an actor. And
Mhm.
it's, on one hand, it's exciting because if it's a good story, you get to live the story. But there's almost a claustrophobic sense when you're doing it, especially if you do a long run. Once you step on stage, there's no more. You can make little deviations here and there in the pause you take and when you pick up the sword or who you look at, but your fate is literally set and you're locked into this story, acting it out. And the weird thing happens with time, I find. Not only do you get a real sense of what they would call a nanke, my destiny is set, I'm locked in, I have very few choices, but time starts to move slowly. Sometimes it feels like you'll never get to the end of this show, and sometimes it feels like time doesn't exist because you're just living the story that's set out for you. It seems to speed up and slow down. Do you feel that, like when you act?
Absolutely. Like you were describing, sound like the plot of Macbeth.
Yeah.
I got to play that role once.
Oh,
Yeah. And I knew that it was going to take absolutely everything I had
hmm
to get through a performance.
yeah.
And I did it for 6 months.
Oh my
Ooh.
God, Louis.
Yeah, I did like rehearsed it for a month and then performed it for 3 and then did it for 2.5 in the park. We did it in a small theater and then did it outdoors. So I knew the play better than I've ever known any other play I've ever done.
Yeah, yeah,
And I knew, like you say, that it's set. I know Macduff's gonna chop my head off. And Macduff was my roommate. So like my best friend
yeah.
Andre is
Nice.
gonna chop my head off at around 10:35 tonight. And it would happen. And it was like, except for intermission, even during intermission, I'm backstage pacing,
Yeah.
drinking a bottle of water, waiting. Just come on, let's fucking go. And by the end of it, I don't remember.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
Right? Time disappears. You step out of time. I think if you're doing it right, you like when you're writing, when you're painting, I'm sure it's the same thing, any creative act, when you're making music, you step out of time.
Yeah.
You're in another dimension. You're in that dimension of where the muse and creativity live.
Yeah.
You're in a different dimension.
And not only that, but you're
You-
channeling it into the world too, right? Like
Yeah.
you're in both worlds, channeling that dimension into the world so that other people can see it.
Yeah.
How cool, man.
Well, this story is living through you. The character is now inhabiting the world through your shoes, and you see it. I played that role too, Louis, and I toured it too. And I know, at the time I wasn't eating enough. I was always tired. And there's something, that role. Every time I stepped on stage, I'd feel a flutter of panic, and I'd think, I can't get through it tonight. It's too big. There's so much. If anyone doesn't know, Shakespeare's Macbeth is a fantastic play. It's actually his shortest play at 2 hours, but it's also one of the most dynamic with multiple sword fights, lots of violent visions. Hecate, the goddess Hecate appears. You have witches, and witchy sisters predicting he'll kill the king and become the king. And he does so, but it all goes downhill and it's just a bloodbath and it's full of wonderful violence and magic and curses and everything. But it's so big that I would feel this overwhelming, like literally my knees would shake and I think, I can't get through it. And then, but this voice in my head would say, just take it one moment at a time. This first scene, all you got to do is talk with your friend about how well the battle went. Can you do that? I'm like, well, yeah, I can do that part. And then I'd say, okay, now this next scene, you're going to get some good news. It just started. Good news about what you're going to. Can you do that? Can you receive good news? Yeah, I can receive the good news. Next scene, you meet your wife, you've missed her, you give her a hug and a kiss. Can you do that? Well, yeah, I can do that. And very slowly you work your way toward the slaughter at the end. But it was a great lesson for me because it was telling me all the stuff that feels unsurmountable, that's to come. In this moment right now, even when things start to get heavy, and you see a ghost, can you ask a ghost a question? Yeah, I can ask him a question. The moment is always manageable. What's unmanageable is what's to come. But what's to come hasn't come. And it actually was a great life lesson for me, which is that frequently when we feel like reality is unbearable, what's unbearable is what's coming, rarely what's here right now. And there's a secret there, I think, for both dealing with destiny, ananke, necessity, which is sounds trite, but the more you live in the moment, the more you're able to push through even the hardest and most difficult things that are fated for you to go through,
Oh man, that's so good. That's really true. I struggled with that, and I called one of my mentors. He's an old teacher of mine. He studied with Atian de Croo in mime, and he was just incredible. He was on the Mister Rogers Neighborhood for a while,
Oh, no
and it
kidding.
was mime. He was a great actor, and he was my teacher. And I would call him like, I don't know, man. I'm we're moving out of the studio into the park, and it's so big. Like you said, it's so fucking big.
Yeah.
And he's like, and he said, well, you don't have to worry about that because whether it's you or Paul Scofield or Ralph Richardson or Olivier, that play is better than anyone that's ever done it. So
That's
take
great.
comfort in that.
That's great, man.
That's
That's awesome.
fantastic. It's like Chris Rock said of crack, shit sells itself, right?
Right, exactly.
Sells itself,
Exactly.
and that's a great lesson too for the actor, which is that if the material's good, if you just get out of the way of the
Yep.
material will do the work for you. And Shakespeare's language is like that. A great temptation for actors is to layer on a lot of mannerisms or realistic hesitations or come up with a bunch of charactery stuff. But the power is in the verse.
Mhm.
Then and Macbeth in particular, I think it's his only play it's an entire poem. There's not one line of prose in Macbeth. And it's his only play, I think, that's like that. It is a single poem. The thing is, you can call it a spell to begin with. And it's got
Sure.
some of the most ravishing, scary lines in all of literature.
Oh
If
yeah.
you can just say the lines, if the audience can hear them, it kind of works on its own merits. And I always say an actor has three jobs. The first one was to be heard. The
Yeah.
second one is to be understood. And
Yeah.
the third one is to be believed. But you
Yeah.
can't be believed if you can't be understood, and you can't be understood if you can't be heard. And that's
Man.
why one of the biggest challenges working with actors now, I don't know if you find this, the younger generation, they haven't developed a voice vocally. They're used to being mic'd all the time. They're used to having, basically to be able to whisper or mumble their lines just like they see on TV, movies, TikTok videos, stuff like that. So when you tell them, like, no, dude, even if you're mic'd, you still got to reach row Q. You still have to have a presence. The voice, the breath is connected to the energy. So
Yep.
even if you say, well, if I'm too quiet, the guy will just turn the knob so I can
Yeah.
be heard in the row Z. It's like, no, it's more than that. An actor, to a large degree, is a voice. A
Yeah.
stage actor is a voice. And when we were younger, Louis, you could have the most handsome, best actor in the world, but if the director at the auditions can't hear him sitting in the back of the stage, that guy's not even getting a spear chucker role. Like he's not getting anything. You
That's
had to
true.
be heard, and that takes a certain amount of energy and force, which a lot of people feel uncomfortable with nowadays, because
Yeah.
to express yourself fully and speak with your true voice is almost an act of rebellion in an age when we're all encouraged to be as polite and soft-spoken and mild-mannered as possible.
Yep. It's one of my biggest gripes going to the theater. Like I can't fucking understand what these kids are saying,
Me
man.
too. Me too.
I hear them. And it's not just the kids, it's older actors that should know better that I know because we went to the same undergrad program. We had training. Why can't I hear you?
Yeah, and they're mic'd, and I'm
Yeah.
in row three, and I still can't hear it. And I sound like an old man, and I do have rotten hearing. But I'll tell you what, back when we were younger, you could hear in row Z,
Oh
bad
yeah.
hearing or not, you could hear. And a large part of being directed was someone saying in the back, I can't hear you.
And if you're not, then you're not going to be working.
You're not going to be working, right? You're not. And it's still, even though everyone's mic'd to the gills now, and there's always some guy, it really is a world of difference too, Luis. I don't know if you know that I'm sure you feel this too. When you're an audience and they're not mic'd, their breath, their voice, their sound waves are coming to you from the front. You're being hit by what's coming out of their body.
Yeah.
When you're mic'd, you got this tinny, accelerated, amplified thing coming from above your head down
Yeah.
on you, while someone that looks like they're lip syncing slightly out of sync in front of you. It's a completely different experience.
You should be able to change the air and you should change the molecules in the air in the room
That's
with your
right.
That's
That's
interesting.
right.
That's another interstitial layer between us and the experience, right? Like digitizing the breath and then projecting it to the back of your
Mm.
head is like a similar thing to what you're talking about when you talk about watching someone else live their life on Instagram reels
Right.
as opposed to doing it. It's the same energy of some imposed barrier.
Yeah, it's like whispering barbarous names or growling them
Yeah,
and projecting them with an intention.
right, right.
And speaking
And
of barbers, go
authority.
ahead. You
No,
said
I just want to say
authority.
authority. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that too. And that made me think of the other thing I was thinking of when you were talking just now, Jack, was I think you might have even mentioned, the spirit is in the breath. That is that is a powerful concept too, right? Like our breath is our spirit.
You
Pneuma.
look at the word spiritus, that's Latin for your breath, pneuma, right?
Yeah.
Pneuma,
Yeah.
that's Greek for the breath. All these words, it's like that old phrase, give up the ghost, meant he said his last breath escaped. Like the breath and the spirit, it ties into that sense of the winds being spirits from the four corners, and any magical practitioner knows that feeling when you're outdoor and you start your conjuring and all of a sudden the wind picks up and the grass starts to flatten and the clouds part and the moon peeks through, and all of a sudden you feel that breeze and you feel like God itself is exhaling on you. And all of a sudden you think, all right, now we're getting somewhere.
Yeah.
You feel that movement. And its corollary is that when you're in your house and the doors are shut and you start to do magic and you feel that density, like instead of air, it's gel around you and it's getting thicker and heavier and condensing and distilling. And you feel that, that this sense of being compressed. And anyone who does this work understands those feelings, like the release or the compression, which ironically or appropriately are like what happens when we inhale and exhale, this
Mm,
sense of creating a cycle of power as we cycle into our sovereignty and our energy and begin to release these words and release the mind from the constraints of the rational and the mundane and all these things and begin to act in ways that are hyper rational or sub rational, that access areas of ourselves that aren't normally accessed through the same habits we're in every day, largely which are habits set forth in order to navigate, home life, work life, family, friends, kids, not to offend anyone, not to express anything too shocking, not to do anything to put anyone off their feet, not to do anything we have to apologize for, not to do anything we have to unsay, but to be in a world where your job is to take focus, your job is to express your inner self and to assume a form that's both larger and truer than the one you inhabit 23 and a half hours of every day.
Yeah, that's right. Back to the speaking, right? This is just the nerd in me having to come out. Like Shakespeare knew his shit, right? And Jack is talking about the rhythms of iambic pentameter.
Yeah.
It just adds to that stack of that ritualistic feeling, right? And it's so interesting to note that when the witches speak, they're speaking in trochaic verse, so all of their stresses are inverted, and they're
yeah, that's so cool, man. I love that.
they're literally speaking in supernatural language, like when shall we three meet again in thunder, lightning, or in rain? And if that were to be in regular iams, it would be when shall we three meet again?
Or double, double toil and trouble, called
That,
and burn and fired bubble, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. As opposed to, is this a dagger which I see before me?
Yeah, exactly.
Dude, that's
Exactly.
great. And just by virtue of the comparison, it gives it like this extra weight. Like it almost like that short circuits the brain a little bit, right? Because you're used to these
Yeah.
iams going that way, and then all of a sudden he tosses in some trochees, and you're like, whoa, something different's happening.
Yes, exactly right. And that's every time they open their mouths, that's what they say.
Yeah, it's
That's how they speak, that
it's
cadence.
it's perfect because the I am the dot the dot the dot mimics in English a human speech. So when you hear the opposite, it's an audio clue that you're not hearing humans. There's
Yeah.
something they're not. They may look like three women, but they're
Yeah.
not. And that's a visual clue because it'd be dressed in all creepy ways. But there's also an audio clue. These are not human mortals speaking. And it kind of makes the hair raise on your
Oh
neck
yeah.
when they do it right.
Even some of the lines in that seem rather mundane, but when they're delivered in the context of the story. They just no other writer knew better than him how to do that. Like when Macbeth comes up on the witches and demands of them, how now you secret black and midnight hags, what is you do? And the witch responds, a
A
deed
deed
without a
without a
name.
name.
Just, I don't know why it's chilling, but it
Yeah, I
is.
just got him, dude, right now. I got chills.
A deed without a name. Isn't that fantastic?
It is. It really
It's
is.
also, oh my God, that's a wonderful line.
So
Hmm.
here's some weird shit that happened. When I did that play, the director had played that role 2 or 3 times before. And he said, we started working before anyone else. We were just working on the big speeches before rehearsal started. I came in a month before and worked on these things. It was just me and him. And he said, have you seen The Wolf? I said, The Wolf. He's like, yeah, The Wolf. I have nightmares about a wolf every time I do this play.
No kidding.
I
That's
said,
so
no.
rad.
I said, no, I haven't seen. And then, sure enough, a couple of days later, I started having wolf nightmares, and the wolf started showing up everywhere.
Oh my God.
And,
Wow.
it was, I thought I was going crazy. When we were indoors in a small theater, it held 50 seats. The audience was given Sharpies, and the floor was painted white, and they were asked to write their nightmares on the floor.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's sick.
So someone wrote, "The big bad wolf is coming to get me," and I was like, "Man, just come on, all right, come on, enough of this shit." And I'm like, "That's it. I'm making it up because if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right?"
Yeah.
And I walk out on stage, and there are 2 kids in the front fucking row wearing matching T-shirts of these giant snarling wolf heads. And I just like stared at them like, okay. And then and it kept on and on. And we get out into the park in Griffith Park in Los Angeles. And um, I said the line, I go and it is done. The bell invites me. Hear it not, Duncan, for it is a knell that summons thee to heaven or to hell. When I go to kill the king, fucking coyotes started howling.
Oh my God, that's
Dude.
fantastic.
Now, there's coyotes would howl pretty often, but it did just so uncanny.
Yeah, the timing. It's the timing that gets you.
I mean, man,
Oh my God. You did it in Griffith Park? That's fantastic.
yeah,
Oh
that's where we
my God.
perform with this particular theater company. Yeah.
Wow. So cool. I love that. If anyone here doesn't know, Shakespeare's Macbeth has a reputation for being a haunted play
Yeah.
because Macbeth meets these three witchy sisters and they give him his tell him he's going to become king, so he kills the king and he keeps going back to them. And then Hecate, Queen of Witches, is a character in it, though she's often cut. And it has a sense of magic and doom about it. And it was written probably because James the First had, taken the throne. He's very interested in demonology. He wrote books on demonology, very interested in evil and the devil, and so it was very popular at the time. But it grew to have a reputation among actors and theaters as being a play of bad luck because it involved explicitly a conjuration of infernal and diabolical forces. So much so that actors, there's a very strong tradition of not saying the name Macbeth in a theater unless you're in the play. And you heard Louis say the Scottish play earlier, and that's how you're supposed to refer to it. What were you told, Louis, if you accidentally say the name of the Scottish play when you're not doing it, when you're in the theater, how do you remove the curse?
You go outside and you spin around 3 times.
Yeah.
You say a curse word, you spit on the ground,
Yeah,
and you knock on the door of the theater and ask to be let back in.
that's right. That's right.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
real, just straight up magic.
I
Isn't
did
it?
that. I did a play a couple of months ago. It was Jane Austen. I did Sense and
Uh-huh.
Sensibility, and I said Macbeth during fucking rehearsal.
Yeah.
But I looked at everybody, and they're like, Go.
Out you go. Yeah, it's great because what's funny is this, and you know this too, Louis. If you took a poll of everyone, like who believes in gods and devils and angels stuff, very few people would say yes. But if you say the word Macbeth in a production, they're like, get your ass
Yeah.
outside the theater and start spinning. They do not play, and rightfully so. It's one of the strongest traditions attached to the theater. The other play, though it's not done much, has a reputation for being cursed, is Dr. Faustus, written by
Yes.
Marlowe. In Dr. Faustus, of course, you know, the character, Dr. Faustus summons the actual devil or Mephistopheles, who gives him a bunch of witches and he'll conjure visions and devils. And there was actually a riot when it was first produced because he conjured at one point, he's supposed to conjure something like a dozen devils. And the word spread in the theater that there was a 13th devil on stage and one beyond what he, supernatural one, as well as the actors wearing red tights, and the whole audience trampled toward the exit to escape. Like, but that shows the mindset. Like, they didn't think this stuff was cute. They believed this stuff back then. When you put witches on a stage, it commands attention. And I've heard people say there's a reason why the play begins, Shakespeare Macbeth, with three witches on the stage. It would have quieted the whole house immediately. No one's going to be chatting and buying oranges when there's three witches on stage. They took that seriously. And the idea of curses and the idea of, people, their doom and their fate and, magic spells and stuff, that resonated very strongly with them. And it resonates with us too now, if we're honest,
The first time I did it, I was 19 or 20. I was a spear holder,
Yeah.
didn't have any lines. A week before tech, the guy playing Macbeth fell off of
Oh,
a platform and broke his leg.
Mm.
Couldn't do the play. They had to get another actor that had just done it in another city. And then I was in a fight with Macduff, and he sliced my hand open
yeah.
with a sword. Second time I did it, I had a slightly larger role. I was playing like murderer number two, and the director was down. Like she had a little bit of a metaphysical lean to her, so she would smudge the theater every night after
Yeah.
the.
Yeah.
One night she didn't do it, and then the next day we come in and the soundboard blew up.
Oh, no.
That's what happens.
That's
And
what happened.
when I played the role finally, 12 years ago or whatever it was, uh, in Griffith Park, 3 hikers had gotten lost in the mountains, and 4 LAPD helicopters hovered over our stage.
Oh.
We're like 20 minutes from the end, and they wouldn't fucking leave.
Oh my God.
They were there for 45 minutes. People started leaving. We had 2,000 people in the park, and then we dwindled them down to like less than half of that.
Oh
And
my God.
we just like, screw it, we're going to keep going.
Yeah.
And I went out there and I'm screaming the tomorrow speech,
Yeah. Right.
signifying, as soon as I said signifying nothing, the last helicopter flew away.
Dude, that's
That
awesome.
sound and fury.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sound and fury signifying nothing. And
That's so
then,
perfect.
Yeah.
like a week later, during the Macbeth fight with 2 broadswords, somehow my sword tip hit the deck of the stage. It bent like this and shot into the audience.
Oh my God.
It hit a kid
Oh my God.
Damn.
flat like this against the chest, and it had stage blood all over it, and the entire place went silent.
Oh my God.
Ran out there. This kid's got, I don't know if it's real blood or stage blood. I'm like, are you okay? And he's like, yeah. He was excited. And his mother's like, oh my God. I'm like, I stopped. I was like,
Yeah, of course you have to.
we're not going on until I know
Yeah, good for you.
it's okay. We cleaned him up. He didn't have a mark on him. Like, are you sure you're okay? You want me to go on? He's like, yeah.
Yeah, he was blessed by Dionysus that day.
Yeah, right. No kidding, right?
And so I go back on stage and right back into the fight with Macduff, and he chopped my head off, and that was it.
Oh my God. And it has a reputation we play where things go wrong and people get hurt. And
Yeah.
it's a play that's a hot play, all
Yeah.
that those stories are fantastic.
I
That's
threw my
absolutely
back
amazing.
out. I threw my back out a week before we
Ah,
went into tech in the park, and I couldn't walk.
oh my God, Louis.
Yeah, I didn't know how the fuck I was gonna.
Right.
I literally I just laid in bed for several days, and then
Oh my God.
one of my castmates carried me to acupuncturist who helped relieve a lot of the pain. I went like 3 days in a row, and I started to get mobility back, and that's how I took up yoga. I went to a hot
Oh,
yoga class like two days in a row, and I was better than I had ever been.
no kidding.
That's
Wow.
interesting. I like stories about that, or stories like that where some sort of misfortune or mishap brings you into connection with the tradition like yoga, or like something that some a healing
Yeah.
tradition, or
Yeah,
I love that kind of stuff.
I just wish I'd been had been practicing magic at the during that really fertile time of my creative process.
But
But you could argue that I was,
you
and I
were,
just
yeah, there's
didn't know it.
absolutely.
Well, right, right. And that's the thing. That's the thing. To create art, A-R-T, and to create art, A-R-T-E, that
Yeah,
Venn diagram. It's the only person that explicitly describes that process is Alan Moore. If you've
yeah,
ever seen him, he's very articulate that as a writer, you spell, but you're also creating a spell. You're
yeah.
creating a reality. You are world building as you write. You are making the dead speak. You're creating creatures that never were. You engender in people's minds voices and sights and sounds that never existed before. You revivify and you you act as a demiurge, a maker of a new reality, and that's what an artist does. It's an incredibly magical, empowering paradigm. And frequently, if you've seen it, when he's interviewed, it'll say like author, comma, magician, comma, Rasputin imitator,
I love it.
impersonator, Alan Moore. It's
Oh,
fantastic.
yeah. I read Jerusalem, and that's a big
That's a
that,
big, great book.
and that's
I
like a
started it.
hyper sigil, right? That is a work of magic. That
It is a
whole
work of magic. And he does, in Alan Moore's Jerusalem, he basically provides a myth for the town he grew up in, for Northampton. He creates a mythic foundation where the archangels live in the corners of the buildings, and the actual streets and the actual sites and stuff are imbued with demons and devils, and the past presses through to the future, and the present is filled with the ghosts of those who came before, who are affecting the action. Like, he completely provides a mythopoetic reality for his hometown in
it's
it.
brilliant. It's just brilliant.
It's
Yeah.
brilliant. Just brilliant.
Oh, man.
I read Voice of the Fire while I was in jail. And have you ever read that?
No, say it again?
Voice of the Fire?
Who is it? Who wrote it?
It's Alan Moore. It's
Oh, I've never read it.
yeah, it's wild. It's I
Writing it down.
Yeah, right, to check it out. The first chapter of this book will like reorient your brain. Um it's describing it's I don't even really want to tell you what it is now that I know you haven't read it, but like it's
Okay.
it's crazy. It
Is
is.
it a graphic novel or is it
No, it's a novel, and the first chapter is like basically this mentally challenged. It's from the point of view of a mentally challenged kid in like I want to say like Stone Age England. Maybe a little later than that, but a long time ago. And he's describing the events that are happening, and the way that Alan Moore is able to like describe things from that point of view in a way that you've never heard them described before. um it is like it is almost like a psychedelic experience, like this book. Definitely
Wow.
recommend it.
cool.
Wow.
Grant Morrison is a similar cat, right? We talked about this last time, right?
Yeah.
He wrote The Invisibles. Uh, he does similar stuff. He claimed to have created The Invisibles as a hyper sigil to great effect. I mean, it transformed his life. And there's like a long ongoing wizard battle between Grant Morrison Alan Moore. It's in the comics world. It's pretty.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Uh,
you didn't Grant Morrison like because he inserted himself into the Invisibles, and
mm,
then there's like a scene where the main character who looks just like him gets
King
like
Kong.
yeah, King Mob gets like tortured and like some acid poured on his face or something.
Yeah, he gets his lungs punctured,
And then
uh,
that stuff
collapsed
happened.
lung, and then it really happened to him. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to watch out with that stuff.
And then he said after that he's like, well, I'm just going to write that this character just looks cool all the time and gets laid by beautiful women.
Right.
So that's what he started writing instead.
Yeah, I remember I had a teacher because I have a creative writing degree, and I had a teacher in college that like something that she told me it was just really great advice, and I actually take it as like fully as life advice. But what she said was like true poetry is describing something in a way that no one's done before.
Mm.
And you know we can use cliches, you know, when it calls for it, but like real poetry is describing something in a way that is unique to you. And I think that there's a key to this, you know, when we talk about the kind of world that we're moving into, or the kind of world that's being created, where we are, like you were talking about, Jack, where we are kind of suppressed, where our voice is silenced, where um we are encouraged to fit in with the crowd instead of speaking out. I think one of the ways in which we can really kind of push back against that is by speaking poetically, and
Mm.
doing so not just in our art but like in our life. I try to do this. Like I actually try to like live my life this way and speak this way as much as I can. And people are like, "What is that? Like who said that? Like where did you get that from?" And it's like, I got it from me. Like that's where it's from. Like it's here right now. This is happening now. And it kind of goes in with living in the moment too, right? Like I'm not trying to just parrot. Like what can we do new? What fresh stuff can we do? I'm very interested in that.
Yeah, I hear that. I hear that, especially since up till now, I think it's been devastating enough to people's voices to be swamped by, sort of corporate type art and corporate type interests that are just interested in most people just being consumers. But we're going to be swamped with AI producers producing for every book that's published, there'll be 500 created by an algorithm. For every TikTok video by a person of someone dancing, there'll be 1,000 generated images that you can't tell the difference created by, generative, computers. It's never been more important to create art as humans because it's an expression of the human. And like you said, whether it's poetry or dance or whatever, I heard a definition from a teacher say poetry is the most important words about the most important things.
Mm.
And and theater should be the same way. A great criticism of theater, like you said, it's lost its magic in some ways, Louis. How many times you see a play, you're like, what are we going to see tonight? And you read the description, it's like a man, a painful recounting of a middle-aged man's divorce. And you're like, oh, well, Jesus Christ, thank goodness we're going to the theater tonight, or a difficult portrayal of an important period of time, like, oh, Jesus. There
Yeah.
was a there was a great phrase they would use back in ancient Greece when every year they would have the competitions for the best play at the Theater of Dionysus. Sometimes a play would be well written, but the critics or the judges would say of it, it had nothing of Dionysus in it.
Hmm.
And what they meant was not just that literally the god Dionysus did not appear, but there was nothing Dionysian. I mean, Dionysian energy, if you know his myths, it's about breaking through the stasis and encountering something new and strange and wild and dangerous and discovering who you are and what the order of things is by going too far, by basically fucking around and finding out. That's
Yeah.
the Dionysian vibe.
Hell yeah.
And you know a play that is of Dionysus because it has in it this wild heart. It doesn't have to have any mythological figures in it, but has something scary and dangerous where you hold your breath and you think, oh my God, what is about to happen next? I can't believe he's about to. you
Yeah.
know, and it tells you something about yourself and about the human condition by pushing the envelope, you know. And and I feel like a lot of art nowadays, there's nothing Dionysian about it. Like it should have reach, it should have scope, it should grab you by the neck, it should be visceral, it should be true, it should be real. You know, Robert Graves wrote and said, you know, great poetry is of the goddess. It is the child of the poet and the goddess. It's her gift to him. And when
Mm.
he honors her, the child they engender is true poetry. And you know true poetry because when you read it aloud, you feel the prickles at the back of your neck and the goosebumps on your arm, which is her becoming present when the words that she engendered are recited. It intermingles magic and art to a point where there's no distinction between the two, you know. And he said, Graves would have said, there's two types of poets, and we can say artist. He would say there's one that's the appropriate one that's affirmed by the powers that be, that merely grinds out stuff that they approve of, that reaffirms the power structure and that's appropriate and that's basically funded by that. And then there's what he would call like the wild talents. There's the ones who are outlaw talents. They're the ones who are outside the system. They're connected to the earth below them and the heavens above them. Their art forms are elemental. They call upon deities and powers that may be forbidden, or they call upon them in ways that are unorthodox. And they have experiences that are inexplicable and unrepeatable and not inappropriate. And of that comes an art that is transformative and shocking because it is a reflection of a conjunction with a power that cannot fit within the appropriate boundaries and guidelines and paradigm of the prevailing geopolitical force, whether that's your parents or your state government or the corporate world. But you encounter this wild thing, and out of you comes wild things, and those who encounter them, you know, that wildness lives in them, and that's true poetry, true art, you know, as he would say.
Beautiful.
Okay.
I love that.
You know that poem, you or the poet Tom Hirons?
I don't think so.
Yeah,
I don't know.
he's a modern poet. He wrote this brilliant poem called "Sometimes a Wild God,"
Oh, wow.
and it's about the wild God shows up at your door and you're afraid to let him in, but he won't take no for an answer, and it's about the rewilding of the spirit, and it's one of the most brilliant poems I've ever read. It just it knocked me on my ass, and I heard it for the first time, read it for the first time last year. And Tom Hirons teaches poetry workshops online. Um, he he's really gotten into the struggle in Palestine as of late, and he just released a new book of poetry, but he's got a couple of chapbooks out there. He's one of those guys that I read. I'm like, yeah, this is real. This is this has got some capital T truth to it, and it's got some fucking teeth on it. You know what I mean? And that's the kind of stuff that I think Jack is talking about. So Tom Hirons, Hirons, just a phenomenal poem. Just even if nothing else, that poem alone uh, speaks to this conversation we're having.
You said it's
That's
called
fantastic.
Sometimes a Wild God.
Yes. And
Cool.
there's a great audio of him reading it on YouTube.
Cool. I have to find it and leave it in the description of this podcast.
Yeah.
We should have Louis find it and read it. I'd love to hear it.
Oh yeah, I'd like to hear that too.
It's pretty long.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's pretty long. I don't want to bore everyone.
I don't think you're bored. I think we may need another episode where we all read our favorite poems to each other. I think
Yeah, that sounds great.
right?
You mentioned Coleridge, and immediately Kubla Khan started running through my head. I've got that tattooed on
Yeah.
I've got that tattooed on my back. Not the whole thing, obviously. That'd be
Yeah. Uh,
It-
you got literature tattoos.
oh yeah.
do you really? Tim, I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah. I've got the last lines of Kubla Khan on my back.
Yeah.
For he on honeydew hath fed and drank the milk of paradise.
Oh my God, that's
I've-
fantastic.
I've got Ovid right here. Um
Metamorphosis.
Yeah, yeah. It's Tempus Edax Rerum, time devours all things.
Oh,
Okay.
That's about it.
Okay. All right,
Tim,
I got
that's fantastic.
there you go. I got the readiness is all.
Oh,
Hamlet,
Nice.
fantastic.
Fall of a Sparrow, and I have Et in Arcadia Ego from Blood Meridian by Cormac
Oh,
McCarthy.
Blood Meridian is so good.
Oh my
Yeah.
God,
It's harrowing.
Oh yeah.
man.
There's some art for your ass.
Oh
You read
man.
that book and see if you don't tap into the other world.
It's
Oof.
some kind of scripture
It,
for
it's
sure.
it's like the Bible. Yeah, it's horrifying.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a great reminder though. Great art changes us. It changes our landscape, our inner landscape.
Oh
Our
yeah.
geography alters. Literally the synapses in your brain conform to what we hear. So if we're constantly hearing is something that's entirely mundane, just helping us buy the next thing, it's a world of difference in hearing something that shocks us or startles us or turns us on or intrigues us or frightens us. And that's why it's such a dangerous impulse nowadays to shield people from ideas that are different from their own, or try to protect them, or this cry that it's unsafe to be in the same square mile as someone who disagrees with you. It's
Yeah.
baffling and it defies what it is to be a full-fledged human, which is to encounter things that are not of you and have to navigate the distance between you and them. You either build a bridge or you build a wall, but either way, you have to encounter them to know the difference. And maybe you build a wall with the door in it, but either way, you can't be protected. We can't just be in bubble wrap, walking around, bouncing off each other. To be alive is to be vulnerable. And every single human has a different story, different needs, different perspective. And that's part of the beauty of us. But it also means we have to develop the muscle to think, where's this person coming from that they would express themselves like that? Who would get that tattoo? Who would say the thing he just said? Who would vote that way? Who would have that strapped to their hip? And it's a healthy question to ask because it makes you ask, what if? You know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's one of the great things art does, whether you're a poet or an author, a dancer, or an actor, it forces you to ask, what if? Even if you wouldn't kill your king, you have to ask yourself, what if I had waited years and years? What if I was the best fighter on the battlefield? What if my spouse daily was saying we should live in the castle? What if the current king was weak and maybe corrupt? What if the powers that be told me I was the one? What if? And all of a sudden you start to think, well, maybe I could. And out of that comes a performance that's of you. It's not you acting like an ancient king. You're living truthfully under imagined circumstances. You're yourself under these circumstances. And when people see you, that's what makes them laugh or cry or hold their breath, is they see a living person making decisions in real time that are exciting and terrifying and wondrous. And it changes them. And it certainly changes the artist, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No doubt about that, man. That's what Stanislavski called the magic if, right?
Mm,
Right.
mm.
Put yourself in that, ask that question, and then you could do that and live artfully um,
Live artfully.
in,
Wow.
in your everyday life, and living artfully by continually asking yourself, what if? What if I go outside of my comfort zone? What
Yeah.
if I, you know, start taking Aikido at the age of 51? What if I scare the shit out of myself at least once a week on purpose,
Yeah.
Exactly.
in
Keeps the
order to
blood flowing.
facilitate
Exactly.
growth? Yeah.
No, that's good. I like that. I like that a lot.
Right. It's funny, as we get older, there's a reason we become less risk averse, right? You don't want to, your back becomes easier to throw out, your knees become easier to hurt. You build up, you've got a mortgage now, you can't afford to, risk that. With your boss, you've got 15 years in, you can't, say what you want to say. You've been with your spouse, is 12th year anniversary, you're not going to express growing old often seems to be an exercise in learning to say less and maintain control and in some ways follow the safest path. And that's how you get ahead, by offending the fewest people. But it forces you to constantly bite back. some
Yeah.
more passionate, wilder strains in you. And if you don't have an avenue for that, it kind of curdles like milk left in the sun. And one of the ways things art and magic do is they provide a line of approach for expressing the inexpressible and touching the untouchable and saying the unspeakable and attaining what cannot be attained in any other way. So, it's a cheat code, I think, to finding the things we crave but have been denied to us by fate and destiny. And it's a way to claim them as a birthright in a way that's empowering, creative, and ultimately successful.
I got a buddy who's a musician. He says what you just said. He describes it as don't take the devil out of rock and roll, because if you take if you do, it ain't rock and roll.
Yeah, it loses its very nature.
There's nothing of Dionysus in it, right?
Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
Oh my God. I love that. I love that.
I love that too. Dude, I think that's a great place to end it on, unless you
I do
guys
too.
have
Yeah,
something else we
right.
needed to. I think we hit everything on our list. I thought that was pretty great. No, very little prompting.
Yeah. Oh man, it's been a great discussion. Thank you guys. I
This has
really
been
appreciate
awesome.
it.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Jack and Tim. I'm really, really grateful.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, and thanks to everybody for listening.
Yeah.
All right.
Y'all
Thank
have
you
a
too.
great night. Do you experience weird shit? Do your parents not like to tell their friends about what you do in the woods? Do you make more friends in a graveyard than you do at a party populated by living humans? Do you have interactions with beings that are not strictly considered human? Do other people look at you like you're crazy when you mention talking to trees in casual conversation? If you fist pumped or even just answered yes to any of these questions, you may be a nightbird. So let's sing together. If you'd like to come on the show and flap your gums with me, share your stories, or just talk about the malleable nature of reality for a while, then send me an email at tim@nightbirdpodcast.com. That's tim@nightbirdpodcast.com. I'd love to have you on the show. But until then, I gotta fly. But before I go, let me say this. Remember, you are never alone. I believe you.